Hi, I'm Brad Rops, Operations Manager of the Southeast Research Farm. I'm here with Pete Sexton, Farm Supervisor, standing by a field of cereal rye. And we've been using rye on the farm here for a few years, adding to our crop rotation length. And a couple of uses, we've been doing some grain harvest and also using rye as a forage source. Earlier this year and for the past couple of years, we have done rye forage trials or winter cereal trials for forage. And the rye we've been planting here as of late for grain production has been newer hybrid lines, and we've been getting a significant increase in grain yield with those hybrid lines. We've put both hybrid lines and open pollinated lines in our forage trials. And for the last, well, I guess all 3 of the years that we've done it, we've seen both the hybrid and the open pollinated lines do basically equally well. So if a person wants to raise rye strictly for forage, you probably can save seed costs by going with the open pollinated lines. And if you're going to go for the grain yield, we would recommend a hybrid line. As far as top group, I guess all 3 years we've done it, Hazlitt is an open pollinated line that is consistently placed in the top yield group for forage production. And some of the KWS lines, Daniello and Bono, have been on the top for the hybrid lines. We've harvested the rye at basically at heading time or at flowering. This year the rye was at flowering. We also had some triticale in the plots, and that was just at heads emerging. And we had winter wheat in there as well, and that was at boot stage. So we harvested the plots, did a dry down to determine dry matter content of the forage, and then equated that to a forage yield per acre. Last year we were running about 9-10 tons of silage per acre. This year we had drier conditions going through the winter and into the spring, and we also had several freezes later than typical that kind of depressed or kept the rye back. And our forage yield this year was, what would you say, Pete, about 7-8 tons per acre, so it was down a little from last year.
Yeah.
Nice thing of adding rye into the rotation is, well, for one, it lengthens your rotation. It can break some pest cycles versus having just a corn-soybean rotation. Some of our pests have managed to kind of bridge that 2-year rotation, so as we lengthen that out, we can improve resistance to insects and disease pressure. Another nice thing in a livestock setting is we have a new window to come out and apply manure, typically at maybe a slower time of the year, or at least not in that hectic fall season when we're dealing with harvest and unknown weather, where we can kind of get cut short and being able to apply manure, especially if we're knifing that in. So rye or any cereal grain is nice to allow that late summer window for manure application. And if we take it off as a grain crop, we can come back with a cover crop and provide some additional forage there. And if we take it off as a forage crop, we then have time to come back and maybe try a double crop system. And I'll let Pete talk about that.
Okay. The only thing I would add to what Brad said is one thing we found in the variety trials that Brad and the crew have run here is the winter rye is more reliable and robust than winter triticale or winter wheat. So when we have really tough winter conditions, the rye comes through it better. So there's a lower risk with rye as a forage, I would say, than winter triticale or winter wheat forage lines. As far as the double cropping goes, we did some work in 2017. There was a better moisture year, got about 60 bushel with beans planted June 12th after rye silage, and we got about 18 tons per acre of forage sorghum for silage in the fall as a double crop. This year, I don't know if your cameras can show it, we're planted right here. We've got some corn you can see the corn suffering a lot more than the forage sorghum. And we're also looking at, yeah, there's some soybeans also. So you see the soybeans are really suffering too with the drought. So a lot of this depends on the moisture situation. If we have good moisture, we've had really good luck, especially putting soybeans in after rye. We've done it a number of times where we've taken the rye off for hay in different small plot studies, and if we get good moisture, we can get a good soybean crop. If we don't, it's like this year, it could be pretty tough. If in a drought situation, the forage sorghum looks the best. But we'll see how this develops, and we'll have our annual report will come out, so the results will be online then in January.